About 3 years ago now, I walked into a screenwriting class. I love TV and movies, and I thought it would be fun to see it from a different perspective. And then I changed my entire career path, but that's a story for another day. I walked into that class thinking I knew the writing rules, but as it turned out, there were so many more I needed to learn when it came to scripts just to get my own scripts to the basic qualifications they needed. Forget writing good scripts, and I was overwhelmed, to say the least. But as I learned them more and I saw how they worked and I understood why the rules existed, and that's the point where I was actually able to improve my writing because I had finally figured out the basics to just get the story down. I'm Megan, an aspiring TV writer, and I want to share everything that I've learned on this journey so that you can go through it faster than I did and better than I did. Today, I want to talk to you about the screenwriting rules. I want to preface before I even get into this video that these rules are not universal, 100% true or not. This is the kind of thing where what's most important is that you understand why these rules exist. Why do people say not to do this or to do this? Because that's what it all boils down to, is understanding the best way to present your story. None of these things are anything that's gonna like ban you from writing scripts. The WGA isn't come knocking down your door. But I think it's so important to actually understand where writing rules come from and what the purpose of them is, because I feel like so often we're just told, don't do these things, do these things. And unless we actually understand why we're being told that, you might not actually end up having the same results. And it's about utilizing those tools to tell a better story. So let's get into it. All right. First things first, this one's a bit controversial, but we're just gonna jump right in with we see. If you're familiar with writing rules, you know that this one is gonna get some people angry. And what I'm about to say might only make that worse. You are allowed to use we see in a script. I know. Get mad at me in the comments, we can talk it all out, but hear me out first. We see is where somebody would say, we see a car pull up in the driveway. We see a character walk down the street. I don't know. That's the format that I'm discussing here. And people say to never use we see in a script. I think that you can take that with a grain of salt. However, this should not be something you use often. There are times when I'm writing a script and I'm like, that is literally the best way to describe what's going on here, is to have a sentence that says we see. I try to avoid it just because I think that there are more creative ways to do things, and because it's used, it doesn't feel original. Now this one is a pet peeve of mine. Don't include information in your script that can't be shown on screen. I talked about this last week in my video about your description for your scripts. When you're writing a script, the dialogue obviously is being shown on screen, but when you take description and action and all of that, sometimes people will write things like, the character was thinking about all the times this has happened in the past. That's not being shown on screen. So when you write it in your script, it's not really communicating something that's actionable. And another one I mentioned last week is how long your paragraph should be in your script. When you're writing, again, not dialogue, but when we're talking about description and action lines, your paragraph should be no longer than about 4 lines long. And the reason for that is because scripts are all about pacing and moving through and seeing the story. And when you've got these really long, drawn out descriptions and paragraphs, it just drags the pacing down. And not to be harsh, but a lot of times execs will just either skim right through it or close the script and stop reading. I posted a poll recently asking if anybody bolded their slug lines, and most people were just confused at why I was saying that that was a controversial question. So yes, it's a bit of a controversial question, but more so just because everybody has different opinions on it, and so it's something that can sometimes get the screenwriting community a little heated, but overall, people don't really care that much if you're bolding your slug lines or not. That is not a screenwriting rule I'm here to tell you about today. More importantly, just be consistent. So if you bold your slug lines, they better all be bolded. If you don't, they better all not be. What is important with slug lines is the formatting. So let's go over the breakdown of what's in a slug line real quick. First of all, you're gonna have interior or exterior, and that's gonna say if a scene is happening inside or outside. That will be abbreviated down to INT period or EXT period. Next, you're gonna have your setting. This could be coffee house, character A's house, park, whatever, wherever your scene's taking place, and when. Most of the time, it should only be day or night. This is done so when the scene is being set up to film, the lighting department, all the departments know how to set up that scene correctly. Now, you can put things like dawn, dusk, afternoon, whatever, but those should only be used if that's very important to the actual story and if the lighting then needs to match that as well. Do not put camera directions in your script. You have to think about where that script is going to be seen. So if you're intending to direct the script, but you're sending it out to a screenwriting competition, the people reading your script don't know that, and all they see is that this script has not been formatted correctly. The reason you don't want to put camera directions is because it's not your job as the writer to decide all of those things. Believe it or not, there's even a format to how you introduce your characters in a script. The first time that you introduce a character in the description, so not necessarily with dialogue, they can speak before something like this, but as soon as they come up in a description or action line, what you want to do is have the character's name in all caps. And some people format this part differently. I like to use parentheticals, some people use commas, just depends on your style. But again, it's about consistency, making sure that however you do it once is how you do it every time. You're gonna want an age. It doesn't have to be exact, it can be a range, and then just a little descriptor. I try to shy away from too much of a physical descriptor, just unless it's like super important to the character, only because that again can impact with casting and stuff like that. It's more about getting to the essence of the character and figuring out who they are than what they look like. And the last thing I want to talk about today is tense. It took me a really long time to actually understand this actively. Like, I saw it somewhere, a tweet or something, and I was like, oh, scripts should always be written in the present tense. Now, what does an English major do when she realizes that she doesn't know enough about something? Well, she reads. When I first got into screenwriting, I realized that there was so much I didn't know. So I bought a ton of screenwriting books. So go ahead and watch this video next if you want to see what screenwriting books made it into my collection and which one should make it into yours too.